At Venezuela, where President Maduro's power had long been regarded as untouchable, a shock occurred. General Manuel Ricardo Christopher Figera, director of the Sabian intelligence agency and the regime's Steel Shield, suddenly defected. The departure of the man holding all national secrets not only shook the security apparatus, but also exposed deep cracks in the foundations of Caracas's power. The key question is not only why he betrayed, but also what he handed to the United States, and whether those secrets have enough weight to tilt the political balance once thought untouchable under Maduro's regime. Manuel Ricardo Christopher Figera was born in 1963 in Punta de Mata, a military background, and tied early to the ideology of Chavismo. He once protected Hugo Chavez, later became a trusted figure of Maduro, and in 2018 was appointed director of Sabin, one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in Venezuela. And to understand why a man once seen as the regime's right hand chose such a risky step, one must look at the broader context inside Venezuela. First, the internal decay was a key factor. When strategic resources like oil or gold were no longer managed transparently but turned into private interests for a small group, trust in the system was inevitably eroded. It was precisely the gap between the proclaimed ideals and the real operations that made even the most loyal start to waver. In addition, the deep presence of Cuban advisors created a special pressure. When crucial security and intelligence decisions had to pass through Havana, many senior officers felt Venezuela had lost part of its self-determination. This not only weakened the legitimacy of the apparatus, but also fueled smoldering conflicts over national sovereignty. Not stopping there, Figera also directly witnessed the stark contrast in life, the Maduro family living in luxury with supercars, international travel, expensive brands, while most Venezuelans lacked food, medicine, and electricity. He also mentioned a group called Los Chaos, Maduro's stepchildren. According to Figera, this group engaged in money laundering, drug trafficking, and illicit asset transfers, thereby providing financial fuel for political campaigns and buying loyalty inside. This showed that corruption lay not only in the leadership tier, but also deeply within the president's own family, turning power into a closed web of interests. In Figuera's eyes, such injustice and dependence were no longer scattered anomalies, but had become the nature of the regime. His decision could thus be seen as a turning point of political awakening, not only a break with one leader, but a warning that when corruption, dependency, and social inequality grow heavy enough, any link in the chain may choose to leave, and in doing so, shake the entire system. What stands out in Figuera's defection was not only how he escaped, but that the whole process exposed gaps in a mechanism once regarded as absolute control. To protect himself, Figera set up secret communication channels with foreign partners as a security buffer while activating a loyal network to delay arrest orders and provide inside information. More shocking still, that support did not come from outside but arose inside the regime itself. The fact that certain officers and security bodies directly participated, from delaying orders to arranging safe routes, showed that the supposedly sealed apparatus had many cracks. To ensure safety, Figera regularly changed hideouts on irregular cycles in Caracas, moving through informal routes to evade the surveillance system he himself had helped build. When the time was ripe, he opened a corridor through Colombia with the covert assistance of intermediary links. The international setting also pushed his choice, mounting pressure from Washington, including the presence of U.S. warships off Venezuela, made the risk of purge ever higher. Finally reaching the United States not only granted Figera legal and security cover, but also created a strategic exchange. Washington gained intelligence data, while he gained a chance to reposition politically. At a systemic level, the case proved that even within a tightly monitored network, the human factor and informal channels can still open a way out. The message to Venezuela's ruling elite was clear: even pillars once deemed absolutely loyal may choose to leave at any time. What Figera disclosed did not stop at internal secrets, but in fact outlined how a nation could become a crossroads of many outside interests. First, the allegation about the Cartel de los Soles raised a major question about the extent of overlap between the state and underground economic networks. According to Figera, some senior military generals directly controlled cross-border drug trafficking routes, turning national security and personal gain into a blurred zone hard to separate. If true, this showed that the line between the institution and crime had been erased. For Washington, this was a strategic detail because it reinforced the argument that Venezuela was moving close to the model of a narco-state, thus legitimizing sanctions justified under anti-smuggling and cross-border crime. The second revelation concerned Hezbollah's presence in Venezuela, opening a completely different dimension. Figera claimed Hezbollah operatives not only appeared sporadically, but operated in an organized way with logistics laundering networks and indirect backing from certain interest groups inside the regime. This meant Venezuela was no longer just a South American nation in crisis, but could become a bridge between Latin America and the Middle East. From a strategic view, this was a distant link capable of altering how nations in the region defined security. For the United States, that information was evidence to classify Venezuela under the framework of international terrorism support, thereby expanding the legal base for sanctions and stronger diplomatic pressure. The final secret concerned Cuba's role. Figera described that many strategic decisions in Caracas had to await approval from Havana, with deep involvement of Cuban intelligence. If true, this showed Venezuela was not only cooperating closely, but had in practice ceded part of its security self-determination to an external power. The international consequence was clear: Venezuela risked being seen as having lost part of its sovereignty. From Washington's perspective, this detail became an important political reason to push isolation strategy, with Caracas viewed as a link deeply embedded in the regional security orbit tied to Cuba. From an international perspective, Figuera's revelations not only shook the inside, but also reshaped how the global community perceived Venezuela. For the United States, they became evidence to strengthen the encirclement strategy. For regional organizations, they were a warning about a nation dependent on outside forces, and for the people themselves, they raised the question: who truly holds power in Caracas and how many other truths remain hidden behind that curtain of power? What stood out from this case was not only the departure of a figure once central to the security machine, but also the ripple chain it caused. From inside government to society, all were directly or indirectly affected. First, within the ruling elite, mutual suspicion surged strongly. When a top figure could choose to abandon the system, those who remained could not escape the fear of being branded disloyal. The result was a tense political climate full of doubt, creating a spiral of smoldering instability. Alongside that, sudden personnel shifts and reshuffles only deepened the sense of uncertainty. In fact, after Figuera's defection, the government launched large-scale internal purge campaigns. Instead of mere reshuffling, many officers and agents were secretly detained or disappeared without leaving any official trace. An atmosphere of distrust spread, turning loyalty into a trap today, an ally, but tomorrow easily a target. On the international stage, Venezuela's image was further tested. The heavy dependence on outside influence, most notably Cuba, led to perceptions that the country had lost the ability to negotiate equally with foreign partners. This not only weakened its diplomatic standing, but also left Caracas vulnerable when facing regional crises. On the social front, the gap between daily life of citizens and the luxury of the ruling class became sharper. While most people struggled with economic crisis, this imbalance fueled dissatisfaction and eroded trust in the system. When citizens queued long for food and drug, and food prices went out of reach, the image of political elites driving supercars and wearing luxury watches turned Venezuela into a sharply divided society. This was not just social injustice, but a seed for the collapse of the regime's legitimacy. From an analytical angle, Figuera's defection could be seen as a warning signal rather than an isolated event. It resembled a reminder that even the most solid power structures could crack from within, and more broadly, it was also a caution to the whole of South America. If a regime thought stable could be shaken merely by one man's departure, then the concept of political stability in the region must be reconsidered with greater caution. The Figera case showed an inevitable paradox in every power system. Whereas the line between absolute loyalty and a choice made by conscience? On an ethical level, this question has no single answer. It reflects the tension between duty to the regime and responsibility to the core principles of society. Politically, the departure of a figure once seen as a loyal shield raised doubts about the endurance of the whole apparatus. When one pillar could waver, it posed the question, does the system still have enough foundation to preserve stability? This was not only Venezuela's issue, but also a general message for any nation relying too heavily on loyalty instead of transparency and efficiency. On the international stage, this story evoked a complex reality where will Venezuela head on the strategic board? Will the nation keep its self-determination or become a pawn in the competition for influence among powers like Cuba, Iran, and the United States? That overlap itself showed Latin America was not just a periphery, but a central space in global security calculations. From here came three key lessons for Venezuela. A system built on fear and corruption cannot endure. For the international community, this case highlighted the strategic role of Latin America, and for the people, it confirmed that power is never immutable. Even pillars once thought solid can shift in a single moment. The image of Maduro living under the obsession of betrayal was the clearest proof of that fragility. Do you think Figuera's defection was merely a personal event, or was it a signal foretelling a larger chain of movements in Venezuela's future? Share your perspective in the comments. If you found this analysis useful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to follow more global, political, and current affairs analyses. Thank you for staying with us until the end of the video.